February 17, 1944. Truk Lagoon, Central Pacific. The sun rose through sheets of mist and diesel vapor, glinting off calm blue water that hid Japan's most powerful fortress. Inside the anchorage, sailors stretched and lit cigarettes, believing distance was their armor. They called Truk the Gibraltar of the Pacific. No enemy had ever come this far. But 300 miles away, the ocean trembled under wings. Radar operators aboard Task Force 58 watched the blips tighten, hundreds of American fighters converging like a storm. In 40 minutes, the myth of invincibility would end in fire. The Empire's shield was about to shatter. For 2 years, Japan's naval command believed Truk Lagoon was untouchable. Hidden behind 1,000 miles of ocean, ringed by coral reefs and anti-aircraft guns, it was more than a base. It was an illusion of permanence. Dozens of warships rested at anchor beneath a sun-bleached sky. Cruisers, destroyers, tankers, and carriers once feared across the Pacific. Massive fuel tanks lined the jungle hills, camouflaged under palm leaves. Airfields dotted the islands like steel teeth. Every officer who arrived was told the same thing. Truk is safe. To the Americans studying it from afar, Truk was not a mystery but a schedule. Reconnaissance planes from the Gilberts brought back maps of every inlet, photograph by photograph. Each shadow on the lagoon floor told them where ships hid. Each runway length whispered how far fighters could reach. For Admiral Marc Mitscher, commanding the new fast carrier Task Force 58, this wasn't just another raid. It was the moment to cripple Japan's central nervous system. In early February, as weather fronts swept across the Pacific, American carriers slipped silently west. 9 decks of steel, each one humming with aircraft, Hellcats, Avengers, and Dauntless bombers stacked like coiled energy. Below decks, pilots memorized photographs of the lagoon, tracing targets with grease pencils. They knew what Truk meant. Revenge for Pearl Harbor, and a warning to Tokyo that distance no longer guaranteed safety. Japanese intelligence saw some of it coming. Reports of carrier sightings east of the Marshalls, radio silence broken for a moment. But they dismissed it. Their doctrine still believed in decisive fleet battles fought ship to ship, not in air assaults launched from beyond the horizon. "No enemy can strike Truk unseen," a staff officer wrote in his diary. "The sea itself protects us." But on the night of February 16th, the horizon began to flicker. American radar picked up faint echoes moving toward the lagoon. Cargo ships, patrol craft, unaware of what followed behind. Mitscher's fleet accelerated to 25 knots, wind over deck rising. Below, hangar crews fueled aircraft by lantern light, the smell of aviation gas mixing with salt. At 4:30 in the morning, every ship went dark. Engines roared beneath blackout covers. The men had been told this target was different. There would be no quick retreat, no partial victory. They would strike until Truk ceased to exist as a base. And just before dawn, somewhere over the endless Pacific, a radar operator whispered the words that ended 2 years of Japanese certainty. "Contact. Multiple returns. Range 160 miles. Then, the machine began to wake. At 5:12 in the morning, the first carrier decks came alive. The night was still ink black, lit only by red lamps and the flicker of exhaust flames. On the USS Essex, sailors pushed sleek F-6F Hellcats toward the catapult tracks, tires squealing on wet steel. The flight deck quivered under the steady rhythm of engines warming, piston thunder echoing across the waves. From above, the formation looked like a moving city of light and motion, each carrier aligned in perfect geometry. The machine had awakened. For the United States Navy, this was the doctrine perfected over years of costly learning. Coordinated carrier warfare. No longer were ships the weapons. The carriers were the battlefield. They carried 500 aircraft between them, each with a specific target assigned. Runways, fuel depots, moored cruisers, communication towers. Every bomb, every torpedo, every bullet had a destination. In the ready rooms, pilots went through their final checks. The mission was simple on paper: annihilate Truk's capacity to fight. But in practice, it meant diving through enemy flak, hitting pinpoint targets while dodging interceptors rising from hidden airstrips. One pilot, Ensign William Billy McCown, would later write in his log, "It felt less like flying into battle, and more like entering a machine that didn't stop moving. We were just one of its gears." At 6 o'clock in the morning, Task Force 58 turned into the wind. Mitscher's flagship, the USS Bunker Hill, sent the launch signal, a single flashing light across the carrier line. Go! Engines roared to full throttle. One by one, the Hellcats clawed into the sky, followed by dive bombers and torpedo planes. Each aircraft carried hours of planning in its bomb rack. By 6:30, more than 180 planes were en route to Truk. Their formations stretched across the horizon like migrating birds of steel. Below, the fleet maintained radio silence. Operators hunched over radar scopes watched the returning dots fade as the squadrons moved beyond range. Then new echoes began to form, faint returns bouncing from the far edge of the radar circle. The Japanese defenders were scrambling fighters. Truk was awake. The Americans flew on instruments through the dawn haze, trusting numbers more than eyes. Coordinates, bearings, altitude. In the cockpit, condensation dripped from oxygen masks. The air reeked of sweat and fuel. Miles below, in the lagoon, sailors were still unaware. Breakfast fires smoked in open galleys. Officers walked the decks in white caps, unaware that an entire armada was already descending through the clouds above them. By 7 o'clock in the morning, the formation leader checked his chronometer. He looked down at the gray-blue circle of Truk and pressed his radio key once. Attack formation. Now. Then, the sky broke open. At 7 o'clock in the morning, the first wave reached Truk Lagoon. The clouds thinned, revealing a vast turquoise ring. The lagoon's coral walls glinting like glass under the rising sun. For a moment, everything below looked calm, almost peaceful. Then the lead Hellcats nosed down. The first bombs fell at 7:04. They struck the northern airstrip at Eaton Island, hangars erupting in fireballs, palm trees splintering like matchsticks. Seconds later, another formation dived toward the harbor. The torpedo planes released their loads low and level, skimming the water so close their propellers almost brushed the spray. From the Japanese decks, chaos. Sirens screamed through the still air. Sailors ran half-dressed, tripping over each other as the first explosions tore through moored ships. The cruiser Katori shuddered under direct hits. Nearby, a destroyer tried to raise anchor, its chain still coiled when the second bomb struck the bow. In the control tower, Japanese officers shouted orders into phones that no longer worked. Antennas lay twisted. The lagoon's radio network had gone silent within minutes. The sky, once their shield, had become their prison. Back above, the American pilots could see everything. Smoke columns curling up through the dawn light, silhouettes of ships scattering like insects in clear water. One pilot described it later. It looked like an aquarium suddenly boiling. By 7:30, the second wave arrived. F-6F Hellcats roared overhead, strafing airfields and docks. The sound was a constant metallic shriek. Bullets tearing through corrugated roofs, through wooden barracks, through open decks lined with ammunition crates. Black smoke began to roll across the lagoon, blotting out the sky. Inside the bay, the Japanese light carrier Shokaku Maru attempted to flee. She made it barely a mile before two 500-pound bombs pierced her flight deck. Flames reached the bridge in seconds. Survivors dove into the oil-slicked water, vanishing under waves coated with fire. By 8 o'clock, the lagoon had become a cauldron. Ships collided as they tried to escape the narrow channels. Ammunition barges exploded in chain reactions. Each blast lit the surface crimson, then black again. Up in the American formations, the calm voices of strike leaders filled the airwaves. Targets neutralized. Begin secondary runs. There was no emotion, only sequence. At 8:15, the last formation pulled away, leaving behind a horizon that burned. From 10 miles out, Mitscher's radar operators logged the final signal returns. Dozens of echoes fading one by one, replaced by static. And for a brief, uncanny moment, the Pacific was silent again. But that silence did not mean peace. It meant annihilation completed with precision. The commanders on the carriers looked west through the haze and understood. Truk had ceased to exist as a base. And yet this was only the beginning, because the system that destroyed Truk was still accelerating. By 9 o'clock in the morning, the attack had become something larger than battle. It was process, a mechanical coordinated storm that moved with the precision of a factory line. Every element of the American fleet operated on rhythm: launch, strike, refuel, reload, relaunch. It was not chaos. It was design. Admiral Mitscher's Task Force 58 embodied a new kind of warfare: industrialized, automated, and data-driven. 9 carriers, 500 planes, each strike tracked in real time by radar and plotted by analog computers aboard the command ship. The system no longer relied on guesswork or intuition. It relied on information. Radar picked targets, fighters cleared the skies, torpedo planes finished what sensors began. In 40 minutes, radar and coordination had accomplished what fleets once required months to achieve. Japanese defenses, built for ship-to-ship duels, were useless against invisible eyes that could see through cloud and distance. Their anti-aircraft guns fired blind, guided by sound and smoke rather than instruments. Each minute another warship fell silent. By noon the figures were staggering. Over 200 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 40 vessels burning or sunk, and fuel depots erupting across multiple islands. American losses: 12 planes. 12! The ratio was so lopsided that even Mitscher's officers double-checked their reports before transmitting. It seemed impossible, until they saw the photographs. Reconnaissance. Hellcats flew low over the ruins at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The images they brought back were surreal. Coral beaches covered in black smoke, wrecked hulls half submerged, and the once proud Japanese flag fluttering weakly from a mast that leaned into the sea. Inside the Japanese command bunker, Rear Admiral Kakuta Akiyama dictated a final transmission before cutting power. Enemy control absolute. We cannot fight what we cannot see. Those were the last words ever sent from Truk's main radio tower. Minutes later, it was obliterated by a 500-pound bomb. The morale became clear even as the smoke still rose. The age of individual valor, of ships facing each other broadside to broadside, was over. Courage, precision, loyalty. None of it could outfight coordination. The Americans had built a machine that multiplied every effort by the hundreds and reduced distance to a number on a radar screen. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Mitscher stood on the deck of Bunker Hill and watched the smoke columns rise like black spires. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The result spoke for itself. They had proven that the future of war wasn't decided by strength, but by systems. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sky over Truk Lagoon looked like a thunderstorm made of smoke. Columns of black rose 20,000 feet into the air, bending eastward in the wind. Beneath them, the once blue water shimmered with oil and fire, an ocean burning in silence. The lagoon that had fed an empire now floated with its wreckage. Across the scattered islands, Japanese survivors wandered in disbelief. Some clutched rifles without bullets. Others searched for drinking water in craters still steaming. Entire barracks had vanished. The airfield at Etten was a cratered ruin. On Dublin Island, officers tried to regroup, but the command post had been vaporized. Every antenna was gone. Every transmitter melted into glass. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Japan's naval nerve center in the Central Pacific was blind. Out to sea, the American carriers reformed formation lines, silent except for the hum of engines and the faint crackle of radio reports. Pilots who had flown 3 sorties now sat on the flight deck, helmets still in their hands, staring at the horizon. They didn't cheer. There was nothing left to fight. One airman wrote later, "It didn't feel like victory. It felt like watching history being erased in real time." At 4:15 in the afternoon, Admiral Mitscher received the confirmed tally: 40 ships sunk or destroyed, 275 aircraft annihilated, 4 airfields rendered unusable. Truk, once the Gibraltar of the Pacific, no longer existed as a functioning base. Japanese reinforcements in the Carolines were cut off permanently. It had taken less than a day. In Tokyo, the Imperial Navy's High Command received the first intercepted messages by midnight. The silence from Truk told them everything. Their greatest stronghold had fallen without a single American battleship entering the lagoon. The shock rippled through strategy meetings, not just because of what was lost, but how it was lost. The Japanese had believed in fortresses and proximity, in armor and bravery. The Americans believed in reach, rhythm, and information. That difference decided the Pacific. By nightfall, the fires at Truk still burned, painting the clouds crimson. The oil from sunken ships spread across the lagoon, forming a dark mirror that reflected the flames of their own defeat. Even in darkness, the wrecks glowed faintly beneath the surface, ghostly shapes lying in perfect rows. From above, reconnaissance aircraft filmed the scene for intelligence archives. The footage would later astonish the world. An entire fleet destroyed in its own harbor, without a single shell fired from another ship. By 5:30 in the evening, Task Force 58 turned east. The decks were littered with spent shells, oil stains, and men too tired to speak. The Pacific stretched endless and calm again, as if nothing had happened. But beneath that calm floated the truth. The empire that once claimed the seas had lost its heartbeat in one day, and the men who watched it end carried a silence deeper than victory. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the last traces of daylight slipped behind the smoke, turning the lagoon into a mirror of ash. Beneath those dark waters lay a generation of ships, planes, and men, all silenced in a single day. The air smelled of burned fuel and salt. Even the gulls had vanished. From 1,000 miles away, radio analysts at Pearl Harbor marked the transmission logs. They counted fewer and fewer Japanese signals each hour until finally, there were none. For the first time in the Pacific War, an entire fleet had been erased not by another fleet, but by a system. Truk was more than a victory. It was a revelation. It proved that information could be deadlier than armor, that speed could outweigh size, and that precision could shatter empires faster than any shell. What centuries of warriors called valor had met its modern successor: coordination. The Americans had not simply bombed a base, they had demonstrated a new law of warfare. Whoever could see first, strike first, and recover fastest would always win. Machines had become extensions of thought. Radar screens turning signals into knowledge, pilots becoming data points in a single moving equation. In the years that followed, that same doctrine would cross oceans and decades. From Okinawa to Baghdad, from the carriers of 1944 to the drones of the 21st century, the rhythm remained unchanged. Distance no longer meant safety. At Truk Lagoon today, divers still descend through those same blue depths. The wrecks lie preserved, entombed in coral, engines intact, plates rusting quietly in the dark. They are not just relics of a lost empire. They are warnings carved in steel, that technology, once awakened, never sleeps again. And so, when historians look back at that February morning, they don't see just the smoke or the fire. They see the moment the old world of war ended and the new one began. The moment when radar, carriers, and coordination became the new weapons of destiny. In the end, America's greatest weapon wasn't its bombs or its ships. It was a system. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and share your thoughts on this in the comments section.